So it's been about 2 weeks. I was supposed to do a weekly vlog last week and I did not. So it's been 2 weeks since I have updated you on what I have been reading. I told myself I was going to do these weekly catch-ups and then I missed one. So I do apologize. But I do have some updates. I do. It's been a slower month in general, just in terms of me reading. September, I felt like I read things super fast. Maybe it's just the type of books that I was reading. This month, definitely things have slowed down. But I have finished 2 books of DNF, 1 book, and I started 3 new books. So anyway, let's get into it. Let's start with the one that I had started in my last video, which is Long Live Evil by Sarah Reese Brennan. So I read about 100 pages of this and I realized, you know what, or not even realized, I think from the first sort of few pages, I was not sure about this book. And by page 100, I just decided to call it done. I don't enjoy how meta this is. It is very different to what I was expecting it to be. Let's just put it that way. I thought it was going to be a dark book. I thought, you know, basically the story is she gets sucked into a fantasy world of these books that she reads. And so she knows what is supposed to happen in this world, and because it's all based on this trilogy or this set of books that she reads. And I thought that the concept was really fun, like being trapped inside one of these worlds that we all love to read about. But I feel like the execution just fell short. I didn't really enjoy how it was written too. It was very info dumpy, very you had to kind of keep up because you were thrown a lot of information all at once, all of the time. Even by page 100, I was still trying to figure out what the world really was like, because every other page you're like learning something, or she's telling you, you're not really learning it with the story. The narrator's just constantly telling you stuff because she knows the book. And I didn't like it. I just, honestly, it just felt a bit jarring. I could see that it was trying to be humorous, but I wasn't in the mood to read a book like this. So I have DNF'd this book, which is sad because, you know, it would have been a really nice book for me to enjoy. So, but sadly, a DNF, and most likely going to be in an unhaul pile. So because I was just struggling quite a bit, I really wanted to read a book that I could finish and actually talk about. So I did decide to pick this one up. My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. This is so disappointing, this book. This was so meh. I gave it 2 stars. I feel like it could be 1.5 or 1 star. It just wasn't good enough. I feel like it was like one of the drafts. You know, when you're writing a book, you have like multiple drafts. And I've been watching a lot of AuthorTube on YouTube. You know, I know about this stuff, obviously. Not that I've ever written a book, but I'm interested because I actually have a lot of ideas that I would like to put down on paper. But this, personally to me, and not to be insulting at all to the author, this didn't feel like a complete novel. This felt like a first draft, second draft, third draft, just like when you're like trying to piece everything together, but there wasn't enough meat to this story. Basically, it is like a little cute romance, but the vampire was very unsexy. I feel like when you're reading about vampires, you want them to be sexy. He was incredibly unsexy, and he was unsexy to the point where it just was very cringy. Like, his dialogue was cringy. Their whole interaction was very, very cringe fest for me, and I could not get behind it. There were some steamy parts in the book, but because you're not really attractive to the vampire, like when you're reading it, I had like no interest in him whatsoever, because he was basically like beyond a dork. Like, I like dorks, I like geeks, I think they're sexy, but he was like beyond that. Like, no. So when they actually like got together, it just didn't seem very it seemed like 2 different books, and the ending was so bad. So yeah, I didn't like this book. I rated it really low. Don't want to spoil it for anyone, so I didn't want to go like too much into detail. Maybe when I do my recap for the month I will, but I read that one. At the same time, I was trying to read Hex, and since then I actually have finished Hex. I actually finished this yesterday. Was it yesterday? I don't know. This one took me a good 2 weeks to finish. It's just slow. So this is by Thomas Oldhubolt. I have read one more book from him, which was Echo, and I read that last year. and I really enjoyed it, but that also was a slow book to get into. I ended up giving that a 4-star. This one I'm giving a 3-star, and I think it's more like towards the low 3-star. Not that I think this book is written badly in any way, but for me personally, it just is not the type of book that I personally enjoy, I think. And that's just something for me to learn that I'm figuring out myself. So it's not really the author's fault. It's just, I've noticed with his writing, it does take, it's like a slow build up to the horror. There's always horror or like weird elements in the beginning or through the story, but really like the end of the book is really when you get to the most horrific like scenes or devastating situations and stuff. I've also noticed with the 2 books that I've read from him, because obviously I have not read all of his books, but I've read these 2 books now, I have noticed that his books are very emotional. Like they do actually pull on your heartstrings. There is a lot of character development in them, so that when something happens to a character, you actually feel, which is a good thing. Like that's something that you want from an author. I just wish that he got to the point a little bit faster with this story. I also didn't, at the end of the day, really like the whole concept of the story. So basically, this is about a small town. The original book that he wrote, which was in Dutch, I thought he was a Swedish author. I'm so sorry. He's actually Dutch. The original book that he wrote was in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands. I actually don't know where it was, but it's a little small town in the Netherlands. Apparently he changed the ending of this book when he rewrote it in English. I think he rewrote it in English, but then he also had help from obviously a translator because English is not his first language. So you're reading a book that obviously is not written really in English tone, but with the help of translation and everything. So I think there is a little bit of that thing that's lost when you do read a translated fiction. But one thing that I didn't really end up enjoying is, obviously you're in a small town. I think in this book you're in Pennsylvania, so kind of not too far out from New York, but still small enough that you're kind of in the boonies. That's the feeling that you get, because this town is very closed off. They don't like outsiders. They try to stop outsiders from getting into town because they basically are cursed by this witch that walks around town, and for like 350 years or so, the town has been cursed, and anyone who tries to leave town that's been born there or eventually moved there and then tried to get away, they end up eventually dying by ways of unaliving themselves. And so there's a lot of triggers in this book. Obviously, if those are triggers for you, you would not like this book. Anything about dogs as well, you would not like this book. There's a lot in this book that normally would really just trigger me, but I think he did write it in a way where I wasn't off-put by a lot of the ideas and thoughts and situations that happened in here. I just took it as it is. I know I'm reading a horror story, so, it's not going to be goody two-shoes and lovely to read all the time, right? That's just not how horror works. So that's absolutely fine. You kind of need like thick skin to read horror most of the time. I wish that there was more horror elements in this, to be fair. I thought it was very weak on that side of things. I actually thought Echo had a lot more horror elements to it, and it just drew me in more to the story, even though I was vastly confused about what was going on in Echo for a lot of the story. This one, for me, did not work. It just felt too like it was set in the modern time, but then you have a 350-year-old witch who walks around town haunting people. And to be fair, like they live a very ordinary, normal life, these people, and then because of some situations that these kids end up doing, silly little teenagers that they are, they know that they're stuck in town for the rest of their lives. They're sick of it. They want to make a difference. They want to maybe break the curse. And so they become rebellious. They do a few things. There's some other really creepy characters in here as well. But it kind of reflects on the fact that our morality is really based on like the situation that we live in. If we are pushed to the edge of, what we deem to be the right way to live and what we deem to be acceptable way for us to carry forth and get on with our lives, there's definitely gray areas of that where people show their true colors of what type of person they really are. There's also a whole other theme running through this novel about being a parent and loving your children equally or not equally, which I found very interesting. I myself am a parent, but I am only a parent of one. If I had multiple children, would I even think of that? You always ask your parents, if you do have parents, or, I have in the past, who do you love more, and of course they never tell you. If they're good parents, they shouldn't tell you, right? But they always say, well, we don't have a favorite, right? But there's this definite theme in here about having the favorite child. And I didn't realize it at the beginning, but definitely, obviously it becomes very obvious when you get like middle way through or towards the end of the book, like what the whole point was of that. But, I don't know. I just felt like it under-delivered on what it was trying to do. And there was a lot of like grotesque descriptions at the end of the book that I felt were very jarring, because the way that the book was going, it didn't have that all throughout the novel. And then to throw it right at the end for just shock value, I didn't really appreciate that either, because I think it could have been a little bit more subtly hinted at, or throughout the novel, you add a little bit more of those grotesque things. And then I'm saying things, so I don't really want to like explain what's going on. And then obviously, as the book progresses, it gets worse as a reader when you're reading it, but it's not as jarring. But maybe he wanted it to be jarring. I don't know really what I'm talking about here, but I just feel like I kind of appreciated the ending. I thought the ending was fine. I liked what he did with the ending, but I also just didn't feel like the execution of everything really was 100%, unfortunately. For me, I've seen other people love this book. Other people give it like 1 star. So it's pretty divisive, I think. I wouldn't recommend reading this book, honestly. If you're going to read from him, I would recommend Echo. Even though when I read Echo last year, I think I said the same thing, where there's going to be a lot of people who don't like this book. But I appreciated it more, so I would recommend that book over this one. And they're very different from each other, like incredibly different from each other. I wouldn't even really think it would be the same author that wrote either book, just because of the way that they're written. I don't know. It is what it is. So I read those 2 books. I did also start reading these 3, because I was just like, what am I going to read? I was kind of struggling. So I actually read a chapter from each of these to decide which one I wanted to read first. So the first, and actually I liked all of, actually no, I'm going to lie to you. I was just going to lie to you. 2 out of the 3, I really enjoyed the first chapter. First chapter, one of them, I was like, I'm not really sure I'm going to like this book. So it was pretty telling. But anyway, the first one that I read in terms of like the first chapter was The Whistling by Rebecca Netley. And I've seen like she hasn't really written anything else. I think maybe just one other book, but she has like nothing coming out. It doesn't look like, so I don't even know if she's an author that's going to be around. But I did read the first chapter, and I'm on page 15. I actually kind of liked the vibe already. So it is, from what I can see, about a woman who travels to this very, very remote island to be the babysitter of this young girl whose brother recently passed. We're not really sure how he passed or what's happened with that. And also, we just find out that the girl also doesn't talk. So ever since her brother passed away, she does not want to talk. She hasn't said a word. And then they had a previous nanny who left a couple months ago, and they've been struggling to find someone. That's as far as I've gotten, obviously, with just 1 chapter. But I kind of like the atmosphere. I like the way it was written. It was really easy to read. So I'm intrigued with this one. I almost started reading this one straight away. And then I read the first chapter. I think I read the first or the 2 chapters from this one, My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Never read from them, and I really, really enjoyed actually the writing. I thought it was very, very easy to read. So this one, I ended up actually, this is the one I'm reading at the moment. So I'm on page 90 of this one because I enjoyed it so much. But even like just reading the first chapter, I was really intrigued. So it's about these 2 girls who are best friends. The first few chapters, you're really just really quickly learning about their friendship and their different backgrounds. And, one of them is from a more well-to-do family with her parents, very, 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 very strict. And the other one, her parents aren't strict at all, but they're very, lost their jobs and they're really struggling with money. So two very different cultural backgrounds there. You also kind of learn about like how they look and everything. So they're complete opposites in terms of how they look, but they're absolute best friends. It's also in the 80s, which I find really, really fun. I mean, obviously, how could it not be when it looks like this? So I find that the whole atmosphere of the book really, really interesting. And then where I've got to right now is finally, they're teenagers now. I think they're like 17 or something, or 16, 17. And they are hanging out with two other girls, just like the four of them who are really good friends. And they decide to take some acid. Doesn't really do much for them, but one of them jumps in the lake and disappears for the rest of the night, and they're trying to find her in the woods and everything. Some spooky stuff's been going on. And then she suddenly appears in the morning and she's fine, or so they think she's fine, but actually, clearly we know she's not fine. So that's as far as I've gotten with this one, but I'm very intrigued and I think I'm going to read it really fast. It's only just over like 300 pages. So I think this one will be done very, very soon this week. The book that I wasn't really sure about when I read the first chapter was this one, Mistress of Lies. So this, I believe, is about vampires. I've been really, really wanting to read it. It's been one of my books that I've been kind of anticipating. And I'm just feeling like I don't really know if I want to read it. I'm just feeling like I don't know if I want to read it now. So yeah, chapter 1 was really not very long at all. So I'm only on page 12. And I think... what do I think about this one? I didn't like the writing as much with this one. I also didn't really like what was being said. So this is more about we're rooting for a bad person. I don't know whether she's unhinged or not, but she is the daughter of the vampire lord or whatever. He runs some sort of thing with the blood gods or whatever. I don't know. And straight away, like, she is, I mean, I don't want to like spoil anything, but it is in the first chapter, so I don't see how I could be. But she basically kills her father in the first chapter so she can succeed and take over. And that's as far as I've gotten. But just the way that was written, I didn't really like her, but maybe I'm not supposed to like her. I don't know. I was a little wary reading it. I think it was either the writing that threw me or it was the character. And obviously I need to read more to figure out if it's the writing or the character. A part of me thinks it is the writing because I don't mind unhinged characters if the writing is really good. But then it could be both. Who knows? But I did start reading that one and I decided, yeah, like I said, to go with my best friend's exorcism. So this one's a lot of fun. I think once I'm done with this one, depending on how I feel, I'll probably go into this one this week. And maybe this one, but just from the first chapter, I would not be surprised if this is a DNF. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but I would not be surprised. So yeah, that's everything that I've been reading the last couple of weeks. I do have a few other books that I wanted to read this month, so we'll see if I get to them. I will try to post another update next week. Hopefully, I'm sure I would have this one done, but maybe I'll have another one of these done, or I'll read something completely different. Like maybe I'll want to read a romance. Because, sometimes when you read like a bunch of books with no romance, you kind of want that romance sort of fixed. So maybe I'll read a romance after, I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, that's me for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in and I will see you all next time. Bye.